Well, thank you everyone for being here today. For those of you who don't know Veritone, we are an enterprise AI software company that have been providing AI solutions to media and entertainment organizations for about the last 10 years, which for all intensive purposes makes us the OGs of AI as it relates specifically to media and entertainment. And we're very excited to be here with such titans in the space and our wonderful partners of AWS. And just thank you all for being here and look forward to a great discussion.
They said you couldn't do it. Your goals were too big and too audacious, but you did it anyway. You turned a vault of content and data into exponential value. You found a plethora of perfect hires with a fraction of your ad spend. You searched through 700 hours of body cam footage in 7 minutes and got back to making an impact. No matter your industry, we have solutions and services that will transform your teams with transparency and trust as guiding principles. This is you plus Veritone, enterprise AI that uplevels people. Because it's not just about automation, it's about elevation. Lifting you and your people up to do the things that will make a difference. This is your enterprise, your organization. Expanded, elevated, elated. Veritone, enterprise AI that makes you even better.
Well, that was a great video. We all know how content is so important and how it drives so many workflows. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Frank, and ask the first question. CBS News Archives retains the most iconic content in history. What has changed and what trends are you seeing?
I think one of the biggest trends that we've seen is just the insatiable need for content. With the prevalence of streamers, the rise of fast channels, and all of these platforms really just struggling to get revenue and eyeballs. With the rise of production costs, we've also seen that folks want to decrease those costs by using third-party content. When we were in COVID times, with production shut down, there was also a great way for licensees to come and use our archival content to plug those production gaps. It's been interesting to see when we started our partnership about 10 years ago, the 60 to 70% of our licensees were filmmakers and fictional episodics, but now 75% are documentarians. We've also seen a huge uptick in the request for local content, and I think that's driven by the fact that there are so many documentarians out there doing crime docs. And lucky for us at CBS News, we've recently merged with our owned and operated stations. And so we have now 14 libraries to be able to feed that beast. But with an increase in demand comes an increased expectation of a turnaround time. And if I could just paint a little picture, when I first started with the archives, I went over to the CBS News archives. And there are challenges with getting content quickly to prospective licensees in a 100-year-old archive. So I go to the archive, and it's just this giant cavernous room, and one light after another opens up with unending shelves. It looks like the final scene of the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And in order to find out what's on those shelves, you have to go to a card catalog, or you have to go to many leather-bound ledgers that are from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Now, imagine you're a prospective licensee that's trying to do a documentary on a jazz musician. In order to find what's on that shelf, you have to go and ask us to go to a card catalog, find if we have it. Then you have to fly all the way to New York. Let's say you're a filmmaker from, Oklahoma, or a documentarian from LA, and you have to screen the content at thousands of dollars. But what we in Veritone have done is strategically digitize that content so that now when you want a specific type of film from us, we're able to send it to you securely on their platform, and you could view it, in the comfort of your own home without the added expense of travel.
Thank you very much. So from a show of hands, how many people here manage archives or know where their content is? Have rich metadata on their material? Okay, so we'll keep working. So next we're going to ask Kenny a question. Kenny Yee is with CAA. They're a talent representation company. And as everybody knows, last year and the past 18 months has been a very tough year for SAG and WGA and AFTA. So Kenny, what are you all doing to position your your clients for success in this changing environment?
Yeah, certainly we can say it's been a changing environment on our side. I'd say the biggest thing that we have kept true is that as an agency, right, as a representation business, it's all about keeping talent at the core. So in the initial sort of thought process of what does an agency like CA need to do, the first is to get to the pain point of the problem. What is representation? And especially when it comes to AI, what do we need to prioritize, right? We ultimately landed on a few things as we were seeing how the market was developing, which is, look, we're seeing our talent, right? Folks like Tom Hanks out there being deepfaked, being used to advertise for a dental service. Not a surprise that that's not a deal he would normally do, right? We were seeing that there was a lot of prevalence of misuse. There's misinformation. And traditionally, as an agency, we don't hold assets. We are representation, right? We're sort of brokers in that space. And what it came to for us was that there's a fundamental principle as we think about AI in the media and entertainment space, specifically for talent, which is what we're sort of calling the 3 C's, which is credit, consent, and compensation. The last one, of course, very important for us, but largely for us to think about if there's going to be a use of AI technology, how do we really get to a point where we can facilitate and control that usage, right? So what CAA has done as sort of one of the ways to sort of pave the space is partner with Veritone, partner with AWS in building something we call the CAA Vault. So the CAA Vault, I'll admit, is not the most public service at the moment, but it is actually a product that is an end-to-end scanning licensing solution for talent. So if I wanted to take the lovely Sean here, we bring him to a physical space that is owned and operated by CAA, partnered with some of the best scanning technology providers out there to capture his range of motion, every non-existent wrinkle on his face, all of the nuance of his action, his speech, and everything. And we store it and we tag that information and we hold it on behalf of our clients, right? So we can actually then go out and license it for usage in film, TV, whatever it may be. So it's effective, ethical usage of information. And we sort of think that this is the foundations of what AI should be in media and entertainment, right? It's about using the assets you do have, much like CBS is doing, effectively and faster. And it's about creating new assets that are driven by the creatives at their core.
Thank you very much. So Frank, we're going to turn it back over to you. Tell the audience about what was your aha moment when you started to weave technology into your distribution process, and what changes have you seen?
So I remember back in 2020, the team came to New York, and what they had done was they had digitized an entire box of Son of Sam content, very uplifting, category. And we had very limited metadata on that box. We knew that we had shot all of it, we had owned it, but we didn't know what was in it. It could have been, hours and hours of podium footage or just waiting around in the courtroom. But what they did was they digitized it. Then they ran in the platform, David Berkowitz's apartment. And immediately we were taken to inside of his apartment with the police, footage that we had not seen before. And then at one point in the filming, I guess we were asked by the police politely to leave. So the cameraman begins backing out of the apartment and the door shuts and the cameraman zooms in on the famous apartment 7E. Now, that's the end of a documentary. That would have taken a documentarian a trip to New York, viewing hours and hours of footage in real time to find that. And maybe they wouldn't have even found it. They would have just gone to something that we had. But because of running this content through text recognition, facial recognition, object recognition, transcription services, we were able to find this piece of content in seconds that would have otherwise been lost to the sands of time. And, selfishly, we at CBS News also benefit from that because not only can you get the benefit of that technology while searching as a prospective licensee, Veritone marries that metadata to our assets. So say, for example, this past weekend or this week with the events of Iran, if there are producers for Evening News or 60 Minutes crashing to create a piece, rather than have to call back to the archivists and say, hey, get me the tapes from Iran from the 70s, we already have that rich metadata associated with those assets, and we're able to say, hey, that's located on this tape. And they don't have to wait for the archivist to digitize it, send it, and then view it in real time. So it's a real game changer, not only from a business perspective, but also for our own internal practices.
Whoever thought metadata and enrichment of content would drive all these workflows? I should have kept my t-shirt I had from 20 years ago that said, I love metadata. Going back over to you, Kenny, from a talent perspective, from a talent perspective, my apologies, is talent starting to look at name, image, likeness, and how they're going to ID it as data? And for those who aren't doing that, we need to educate the community on that. What are we doing in that space?
Yeah, so the quick answer is yes. I would say they're absolutely starting to think about it that way. But I'd say uniquely, I'd actually flip the prompt, which is to say our talent is now starting to think about the data that is traditionally captured of them, which they never had a second thought about, now as an extension of themselves. It is now name, image, likeness. And what I mean by that is traditionally, if you're working with a major studio, right, we've got the lovely IMAX screens going over there. You see all this Marvel footage, right? If you're doing a film with Marvel, of course, you are getting scanned as an actor. You are getting processed for VFX, for post-production, for all of these factors. And historically, it was always just accepted. It was, all right, the studio is going to go pay for me to get scanned. They're going to store this. They're going to use this. It's going to make the movie better. What we're starting to see, and sort of this is the baby steps, is our talent is starting to realize, hey, those are an extension of myself, and those assets are really worth something. Because if I think about it over the process of time, these studios have been holding 20-year-old me, 25-year-old me, 30-year-old me somewhere in their archives. What could I actually be doing with that if I treat it as an extension of myself, right? Right now, we've got a project in the works with, we have to mention him again, Tom Hanks, actually, with Bob Zemeckis for a movie called Here. It involves Tom throughout the ages, young, middle-aged, a little bit older, all using AI technology to, cover the production costs of traditional VFX. You're de-aging him, you're aging him up, all through legacy footage, right? So now we've got talent asking the questions of, well, if I think about a scan, if I think about the information that is out there about me, it is me. It is an extension of myself. And if technology can actually bring that to life, I should be holding that. I should be owning that because it is me. And I think the education process is finding those opportunities to use it creatively, ethically, creating those technical solutions that help us do it better than, just trusting a studio to handle it for us. And slowly building up this marketplace of education of, when you are representing yourself, it's just like with any of us, it's not just yourself in person, it's also your social media, it's everything you put out there is an extension of yourself. And that's also true for our talent in terms of what they are working on. So I think it's a step-by-step process, but I do think what we're trying to lead the way with on the CA Vault and working with all of you is, this is the first step in thinking about what the future is going to be in terms of licensing of data, usage of data, and being able to really take control of what it means to actually own your own data versus giving it to somebody else.
That's great. It's interesting, just to complement from a strategy perspective, which is where I focus at AWS, we're seeing things also in gaming, where talent is starting to go into gaming and their IDs are being used or their likeness is being used, and then there's royalty components. So it's a really fascinating challenge that we're experiencing, and it's wonderful to be partnered with a company like Veritone who's really leading the charge on some of this. So going to now, turning over to you, Sean, we're all here a year from now. It's 2025 at NAB. What's the future going to hold? And what do we think we're going to be talking about a year from now at NAB?
I think what we're seeing today, so I'm going to talk about today to lead into tomorrow. So what we're seeing today is a lot of folks are finally understanding that they need to be AI ready. But most organizations can't really harness the power of what it can bring to your organization right away. And it starts with, and you've heard these gentlemen say it all, data. Like, our data in this space is different. It's content, it's people, it's those. And once you're in a position where you have the appropriate amount of data that you can really leverage AI to build unique workflows, to help expand what you're working on, to meet consumption demands that are out there on all the different platforms that are there. So that's today. So when I'm thinking about then what tomorrow is of all the organizations are there, what is the amount of upskilling that took place within these organizations? How much time did people move from doing these processes to being on the loop and understanding what they're capable of doing with these tools? Because at the end of the day, these are just tools in their production tool belts. They're tools in their businesses. And so once they found the way to really harness and leverage that tools, what did it really mean to those organizations? And what are we going to be celebrating this time next year?
So Frank, what do you think of this? If I answer the same question, 2025 NAB, what are we going to be talking about?
Yeah. Well, Kenny touched on it a little bit, and given that it's an election year, something that we're definitely concerned with are deepfakes and misinformation. And so what we'd love to see is technology combating technology, AI tools that are able to understand and quickly identify, hey, this is not real. And it's a bit of a selfless plug, but shameless plug rather. But we at CBS News are leading the forefront in that, and we've just developed CBS News Confirmed. It's an offshoot of our standards department, and we will be using a combination of human, AI, and other sorts of technology, not only to identify what is misinformation and the veracity of certain things before we put them on air, but we'll also be developing programs to educate the consumers of other pieces of misinformation and deepfakes that, we've seen in the marketplace, to be able to allow people to understand, hey, that is not true.
I'm sure that's going to be a challenging time coming up on election year. So we're looking forward to hearing that story a year from now. So Kenny, how about yourself? Where are we going to be in a year?
I have to say, I fundamentally agree with what was said here. I think if I actually were to take it a little bit more macro, outside of just the media and entertainment space, one of the fascinating things that we're starting to see, when you look at what Adobe is doing with Firefly, or if you look at what Apple is about to roll out with a lot of their new models, is this prevailing thought of what is effective AI, what is it in terms of tools and usage, and especially what is the data being utilized for it, right? There's been this prevailing thought that we can actually make not just large language models, but call them small language models, right? You can make things more fit for purpose. You can make things more specialized. And especially with what we've talked about today, a lot of what we have built internally to our respective companies is to find a specialized solution. And what I expect we're going to see in the next year is that push from a data perspective, which is how do we actually build, develop, and license our own data sets to be able to use for specialized purposes, right? Because right now, a lot of what exists out there is scraped from the web. It's trained on the Pile or Leon and all these other data sets that are just generic. What happens when you're actually able to process your own information, take the CBS archives, and create something magical out of it? When are you able to do that for CAA? When are you able to do that for Amazon? When are you able to do that for any specific group? And if I wanted access, how do I license that, right? We're thinking about that from the talent perspective, which is really, really micro. But I think we're starting to think, how does that become something bigger? And I'm sure that's going to be a conversation over the course of the next year, which is, where's your data coming from? How have you organized it? And in particular, are you finding a way to utilize it for yourself, or better yet, monetize it externally?
We all know search and discoverability is so key to your content. So I think one of the things that Frank mentioned was things that took weeks now can take days. So it's very interesting to see how that trending is going. So we only have a few minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Janet.
Here you go.
So question with regards to CAA, how do you see yourselves developing those data sets?
It's a great question. In terms of what we do, right? We are facilitators. We are arbiters. What we set forth is that we don't own the data, period, right? We are here to help facilitate. So the first thing is technical standards, right? So in terms of how we've set up the CA vault, in terms of how we're scanning our clients, the first thing that we did was we went out to industry. We went to VFX shops, we'll call them AI synthetic media studios, deepfake groups, or whatever else, and sort of ask them, what sort of data do you typically use to make something, right? What is the requirements? How are you using Harvard sentences or fax positions for your face? What are all of the fundamental bases? We set that as our first standard and looked out to the partners that could do that. And the goal is that we are actually acting as a sort of an agent for the tech companies as well, to say, as we think about this, how this technology itself evolves, how are you using it in a film? How are you using it in different lighting conditions? How can we actually adapt our data set for you? I'll say it's an iterative process. The technology is just growing in leaps and bounds every day in terms of synthetic audio and video and everything else. What the best we can do is just stay on top of it, and as much as we can year over year say, hey, you remember you got scanned a few years ago? That was your foundational set. We're going to re-up you. We need a little bit more. We need a little more information to really make sure we've got something special there. And I'll just say that's what I think is so special about a group like this. I mean, you see what CBS is doing. You see what Veritone has facilitated. You see what AWS has done. Like, we are trying to make it as nimble as possible. And I'm happy to say right now we're pretty happy with what it is.
I think we have time for one more question or two more questions. Please. We'll wait. As the mic is coming to you, just to share, I think from an AWS side, we're seeing a very strong acceleration with customers who have a combination of their customer data, their content data, and their user data, all triangulating to really create efficiency. And that's something that we really see not only CBS and CAA doing, but something that Veritone really strongly supports as a partner.
Hello, my name's Charlie, and this is a question for the CAA. That material, the data that you generate regarding your talents, digital identity, etc., is clearly, highly valuable. If you can say, how do you secure that? Have you got a number of ways of keeping that safe for the future?
The easy answer is Veritone. And quite honestly, yeah, we can get into the technicals of, there's some on-prem storage, there's cold storage, there's some accessible, and it's all about, the different layers that we're doing it. But a lot of it does come down to, for us, the technical moat is around having the best quality data that we believe is available out there. And of course, highly limiting our access points, right? Right now, in terms of who we work with, it's the traditional studios or it's the game studios that want to license our work. One of the first deals we did with the CA Vault was with a game studio, and we'd worked with them before. We knew what the requirements were, and it's about using the infrastructure that we've built with Veritone and others to say, here's the exact data set that you need and nothing more. Here's your access point. Here's what you can take. Post that, deletion, right? That's what you get. And it's still a work in progress, but certainly, you all are definitely more technical than I am here. But I'd say, with our partners, that's what we've seen to be a pretty effective solution so far.
Thank you.
So, Sean, do you want to close out with some closing comments?
Well, look, again, thank you all for joining us here today. I mean, a big thank you to our partner AWS and Karen for your time to come in, support this year. Love our growing partnership. And also for Kenny, for Kenny at CAA and Frank for CBS. I mean, we're just truly fortunate to have you guys as partners and customers for those, and the time that you guys all took to learn something from us today. So if you have any questions or anything, our booth is literally right there. So feel free to stop by. We got a team of experts that will be able to answer all of your questions.